Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO Politics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a US political breaking news update. It also concerns, I think, the war in Ukraine to some degree. I mean, this is national security, so these things are all connected in some way. Incredible news. Now, if you don't know who Laura Loomer is, you probably should. She appears to have outsized influence in the White House at the moment as someone with a very checkered past, and that's me being very generous. So Laura Loomer is a right-wing, white nationalist, extremist, conspiracy theorist who was, during the early part of the election campaign season, traveling with Donald Trump in his Air Force, not Air Force One, but in his plane, going from event to event until there was a kind of scandal about her and she got moved to the side because actually you're a bit too poisonous in terms of PR for Trump at the moment. But actually Trump didn't stop liking her. She then came out and was very critical of certain people in the Trump ecosystem. But she appears to have weathered that storm. As Chris Owicki says, if things were not already crazy enough, insane conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer is now apparently running the US National Security Council. So what's this in reference to? Several members of President Trump's embattled National Security Council have been fired. They were fired on Thursday, per a US official and a second source familiar with the issue. What's this have to do with Laura Loomer? Well, as Trump's lies, the source says, Trump just fired 3 career professionals from the National Security Council at the urging of disgraced conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer. Amidst all the chaos of the stock market collapsing, this is another stark reminder of who's really calling the shots. This is scary. Clash Report says Trump will fire several national security officials over concerns they're not, quote, sufficiently loyal. That's according to Associated Press. And Shashank Joshi from The Economist, quoting or referring to the New York Times, says, absolutely remarkable. A full-blown conspiracy theorist, 9/11 as an inside job, is in charge. Quote, President Trump fired 6 national security officials after an extraordinary meeting in the Oval Office with the far-right activist Laura Loomer. Wow. Just absolutely incredible. OSINT Defender says the New York Times is now reporting that General Timothy D. Hoare, the commander of US Cyber Command, CyberCom, director of the National Security Agency, NSA, and the chief of the Central Security Service, CSS, who was removed earlier tonight from all of his civilian and military leadership roles, was one of the many officials who far-right conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer called for President Trump to fire during a meeting with him yesterday in the Oval Office. According to officials, General Hoare was traveling on work when reports came out earlier today about his removal, with neither him nor his deputy at the NSA, Wendy Noble, being told the reason for their removal by President Trump. If you are a dictator wannabe, who would you want to get rid of to put your own people in charge? Well, yes, we've talked about the judiciary before. The checks and balances to you, the security services, the 4-star generals, the admirals. That's already happened. Even the JAGs, the attorneys general in the armed forces. Yep, purged. National security team. Put your own people in. People who do the wiretapping, the bugging. Yep, get them out. I want my own people in. This is all looking like we are moving towards an even greater autocracy with none of the checks and balances remaining in place as they should be. A moment of serious concern for Five Eyes partners, says Shashank Joshi again, this time referring to the Washington Post. Five Eyes being Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, and the US in terms of sharing of intelligence. Quote, the director of the powerful wiretapping and cyber espionage service, the National Security Agency, was fired Thursday. The firings were advocated for by far-right activist Laura Loomer. Doshi says, reading the Trump tea leaves, today's NSC firings suggest, 1, the MAGA and the Koch foreign policy alliance is in the ascendancy. So we've got the Koch brothers and MAGA. The influence inside the Trump administration is tending towards eschewing establishment politicians and establishment figures inside important agencies in favor of MAGA loyalists. Absolutely incredible. And also, China hawks are in decline. we've kind of seen this. Yes, the China tariffs were high, right? 34% on top of 20%. That's a trade war you're starting with China. But moving military material from the Indo-Pacific arena to the Middle East arena is to say that actually Taiwan isn't top of our agenda. Really, I think Taiwan has been thrown under the bus here by the Trump administration. So the China hawks are not going to be happy with some of that. So Laura Loomer, rich Jews are destroying America, that's who she is, met with Trump yesterday, may have inspired multiple National Security Council firings. She still boggles her mind that so much attention is paid to the left when right-wing anti-Semitism is far more explicit, hard-edged and proximate to authoritarian power. It's just been the most amazing case of, look, shiny things. And everyone's like, oh yeah, look at the far left and their cancel culture and all of that. Look at the anti-Semitism and look at all those riots and protests on college campuses. Yeah, everyone goes mental over that. Trump gets into power, removes all the guardrails and the checks and balances, and then completely does over free speech. And who's now protesting on the college campuses? No one, because that seems to have been fomented by the far right in the first place. And now no one's complaining about the fact that there's still lots of weaponry going to Israel. Israel is still doing exactly what it was doing. In fact, it's bombing the crap out of Syria now. And no one's saying anything. There's all the far left. Right, when you've used that to get into power, then that all disappears. You realise it was probably fomented by the very people who have now got into power and by the forces that support that, i.e. Russia, bots and trolls. Foment that discord. Let it go. Use it. Get elected. Forget about it. And then you get people like Laura Loomer, anti-Semite, saying stuff like this.
Right, and I'm going to say that. It is always the Jews. It is. And I say that as a Jew myself. I don't understand why.
Which is, there's a lot of context to be said there. She is Jewish herself. If you go and look in, but it's a rabbit hole you probably don't want to go down. You look at the sorts of things she has said over the last however many years. Really, really, obviously controversial, really divisive. And you're like, but hang on, like, what's your background here? And yet, there she is.
Right, and I'm going to say that. It is always the Jews. It is. And I say that as a Jew myself. I don't understand why the rich Jews of this country are so hell-bent on trying to destroy our country. But for some reason, so many rich Jews have a fixation on trying to destroy America. And it's not an anti-Semitic statement to make. I say that as a Jew myself, okay? I am very pro-Israel. I am a self-identifying Zionist, and I am not hateful towards Jewish people. But I will say as a Jew, the Jews' worst enemy is the Jew themselves. And I am really sick and tired of watching all of these Jews with large amounts of money in our country donate to fund the destruction of our nation. And
Elon Musk? Oh, no, of course not.
The communist takeover of America. So, okay, listen up, Jews. Okay, yeah, it's always...
And that's who she is. But there you go. Just absolutely incredible. The US official said Loomer was furious that Neocons had slipped through the vetting process. The US official named 2 senior NSC members who had been fired and said it was shaping up to be a bloodbath. Like, I don't know how you get this to this point where Laura Loomer is being invited into the White House, has these meetings, and then goes out, and then a bunch of people are sacked, and then she's taking some of the plaudits for it. And she said, I forget the quote, but she said, "I may have been behind it," herself. So, she is admitting this herself. This is what Tim Miller and Sarah Longwell said, who are from the Bulwark, on Nicole Wallace's show yesterday.
The fact that Donald Trump appears to be getting advice on matters of national security from a far-right, pro-white nationalism, 9/11 truther is not even the most disturbing part of the story I'm about to tell you. It's that Trump might actually be listening to her. First, the backstory. NBC News today confirmed with two sources much of what the New York Times first reported, that prior to yesterday's Tariff Palooza in the Rose Garden, Laura Loomer met with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. The topic of the conversation, firing members of the National Security Council. Mike Walls, the National Security Advisor and Signal chat enthusiast, was in the meeting defending his staff against what Laura Loomer was saying, that some members of the NSC were, quote, disloyal. Remember, Trump got rid of a career federal prosecutor last week, about an hour after Laura Loomer posted about him online. Well, this afternoon, NBC News is confirming that at least 3 national security aides were fired today, while other news outlets report that the number could end up being higher. Notable that this latest purge is happening a week and a half after SignalGate, a scandal for which no one has been fired that we know of, but one for which we learned this afternoon will be the subject of a DOD Inspector General's investigation involving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Everyone is back. You know, if you're here, we were going to get to the Hegseth of it all and the Laura Loomer, just for you.
I mean, that felt like a report from like a movie, like Don't Look Up or something. You're a fake, you get to play yourself in a movie. No, that's real. Laura Loomer is such a wild-eyed conspiracy theorist. I mean, she's an unapologetic. I think you had on quotes in the intro. White nationalist, like, has said that about herself, like cheered the deaths of Muslims, said that like she hopes for more. I mean, like a just nasty person. I will say, when I was at a bar one time when Carrie Lake accosted me, and Laura Loomer did de-escalate, so I don't have any personal things against her, so I appreciated that. But she is a...
Are they friends?
Didn't seem like it. She's a crazy person, and anybody who doesn't believe it could just Google Laura Loomer crazy or just look at her X feed if they wanted to get a sense for this. The fact that she is in the White House talking to the president saying you should fire people who are in charge of national security, and he apparently said, okay, Laura, great, and fired a couple of people who are in his National Security Council or support the National Security Advisor. And that's how the country's being run. And we have a Fox and Friends weekend host that is running the military, so it shouldn't be that surprising. But I think that it is really just important to like marinate on that the people...
It is insane. Like, what is going on in the United States at the moment is insane. It is bonkers, and it's happening before your very eyes in the open. Like, this isn't some nefarious, there is that too, by the way. But so much of this is just open, brash, MAGA, cultural wars ideology that has seeped into these incredibly important positions. And when you're putting Kash Patel and Don Bongino and Tulsi Gabbard into these positions, when you're putting Pete Hegseth, when you've got Stephen Miller and Peter Navarro doing what they're doing, when you've got all of these people involved, Tucker Carlson, in either in the White House, in the cabinet, or adjacent to these positions, whispering in ears, it seems of no surprise at all that Laura Loomer is having meetings with Donald Trump, the president, as some kind of far-right influencer, online influencer, and dictating that certain people get fired, and had done that earlier as well, as the report suggested. It's just incredible.
People with power in the White House or outside the White House are like these extreme fringe conspiracy theorists that have big followers online, and that they can dictate who is in charge of our country's security, your family's security. And just on this point, one other thing, over at the DOJ today, they had a briefing at the Department of Justice, and it was like Bannon, Benny Johnson, and it was just a whole rogues gallery of Loomer-esque weirdos that were like...
Benny Johnson, someone that's taken money from Tenet Media, from Russia, is now in the Department of Justice having a meeting with Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon's back in there. Like, the US, your government has been accosted, it has been taken over, and what's happening about that? Just incredible. Just incredible what is going on. These are the very worst people for those jobs, doing those jobs. And I mean, I would love to speak to someone who was like seriously knowledgeable about and someone that advocates for, you know, serious American foreign policy, domestic policy, blah blah blah, but also voted for Trump. I'd like to just say, last night, for the first time maybe since the election, Kamala Harris gave a speech and she said, I didn't want to get to this point, but I told you so. And do you know what? I'm at a point where, like, if you think that Kamala Harris's job would have been worse than Donald Trump's, you need your head checked. Like, there was a fully functioning American economy that was doing very well, considering, and Kamala Harris would have taken over the reins there, and you would have had sensible foreign policy, sensible domestic policy. But now you've got burn it all down approach to government and siding with Russia. Like, if you think Trump was the better option than Kamala Harris, you need your head checked. Honestly, you need your head checked.
Like having a briefing at the DOJ about the politicization of our government. So, you know, Justice Department, national security decisions are being decided by MAGA conspiracy bloggers. So that should help you sleep at night.
Sarah, again, I sort of want to widen the aperture here to the many, many conversations we had about the generals and how impactful their warnings about Donald Trump's really, they weren't about his policies or his politics. They were about his indifference, maybe, to long-held beliefs and norms about the rule of law, about keeping politics out of the military. They've blown all that up gleefully over 71 days. Is that sort of seeping into the body politic?
Well, just really quickly, we knew that this term, if Donald Trump won, was going to be wildly different than his first term because those generals were there the first time. You were just asking in the last, segment why voters sort of didn't understand. And it's because, when you take your kids bowling and they're little, so they put up those little gutter things that when they
I put
roll
those
the ball
things
right in the
up.
gutter,
Yeah,
right? It
the
bounces
bumpers.
off. The bumpers, right? The generals were like the bumpers. Donald Trump's first term was filled with career Republicans who acted like bumpers against all of his insane ideas and who protected him essentially from himself. And those bumpers are all gone. And so we are living in the gutter 100% of the time with people like Laura Loomer. And the fact is, no, it is not clear yet, I think, to voters until they feel the negative personal consequences from what Trump is doing. And I think the tariffs, I've started to hear it in the groups. And last time I was on your show was really the first time it had started to bubble up. It's the economic stuff. Even Doge, some people are nervous about it. They don't love Elon Musk, but people have to they have to touch the stove, right? They have to feel the negative personal consequences before they're really going to turn on him. And that's why I think the tariffs are one of the things that are really going to start shifting the environment for Donald Trump, because they will have real world negative impacts on people's wallets fast.
Hey, YouTube fam.
And that is a very interesting observation. Something that I've said actually before as well, that when people start hurting in the wallet, you'll get pushback. A lot of people won't give two hoots about National Security Council personnel being sacked. I do. I think this is incredibly dangerous, and it is indicative of a government that is not just tending towards authoritarianism, is jumped off the cliff of democracy down into the boiling lava of authoritarianism, and it's hurtling there at the moment. It is incredibly worrying as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to be all like fear-mongering, but that you can have Laura Loomer meet with the president of the US and bring about the sacking of such important people, but also people that might act as checks and balances, that might that certainly shouldn't be overly politicized positions. I just think it's really, really dangerous. Let me know what you think, of course. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.